Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where skadoosh indeed for Kung Fu Panda 4. I thought Jack Black was going to end up embarrassing himself. I did love the song, and I did get it. I did get Baby Hit Me One More Time when it dropped on Friday. And I thought that the music video that they did on the red carpet was very amusing. But I thought that they were, just going to basically have a paycheck gig. But Jack Black delivered. We think he's overexposed a little bit, but he's just going to continue to get work because he powered this to a very strong #1. And don't worry, Dune 2 fans, we're going to talk about Dune 2 because Stilgar jokes aside, Dune 2 really does seem to be fulfilling some sort of box office prophecy. The stuff that Dune 2 is doing hasn't even been written. That's how unexpected it is. It's coming out of nowhere. But speaking of coming out of nowhere, first let's turn our eyes to the Dragon Warrior of this weekend's frame, Universal. Oh, is Universal really John Cena? You don't see him until it's too late. Once again, the studio, surprise, has a boffo hit when everyone, people were projecting at the last minute that Kung Fu Panda 4 would do this well, but it's crazy to actually see it, especially because this was a last minute prediction. It seemed kind of lame up until then. So it was a decisive win, and not only was it a decisive win, but it cast more shade on Disney. Whew! And by the way, Universal ain't gonna stop. They're not letting up. In fact, today, they announced that they are doing another Super Mario Brothers movie. We knew they were, but now it's official. I love that they announced it on the tail end of their Bofa opening for Kung Fu Panda, although Universal has 2 animation houses. Just like Disney has Disney Animation and Pixar, Universal has Illumination and Dreamworks. And Illumination, of course, is the one behind Super Mario Brothers. But it's all under the Universal umbrella and the IP that they can use in their theme parks and beyond. But yes, another Super Mario Brothers movie, same directors, confirmed. You guys are going to have to hold my hand through this one. I'm open to learning. And this is set for the first weekend of April 2026, which, by the way, was when the first film opened, first weekend of April 2023. Although that was a very special time when they had no competition for the entire month. And I wonder if the other studios will be as well, it wasn't generosity. It was, the strikes and, COVID and all that. But the question is, will anyone challenge Super Mario Brothers 2 or whatever they call it? They didn't say what the story was going to be. Or will they get out of its way because they know what a juggernaut that it is? Now, not only does Kung Fu Panda 4's opening weekend almost match the debut of the very first Kung Fu Panda over a decade ago, the numbers are supposed to actually go up. But this is very nice considering how, a win's a win. We'll take it. When you factor in inflation, it would be nicer if this was a little higher. But, it hasn't been able to duplicate the first film's success yet. So, yay, it's heading in the right direction. Would they really make a Kung Fu Panda 5? When I saw the movie, I thought, no way. But now I'm like, why not? People clearly like the skadoosh. But this is also Dreamworks' biggest opening weekend in quite some time, showing that the long-running, long-moving, they've been at every studio practically, that they still have it. They still got it because it's got to have been tough over the past few years because, again, they're partnered with Illumination under the Universal umbrella, and that sister studio's been posting Boffo openings left and right. Whew! So Dreamworks, doesn't want to be the also ran. They want to be in there too. And they are. They very much are. Meanwhile, the Mouse House's animation crown jewel, the one that started it all, has yet to recover from the pandemic. With Kung Fu Panda 4's opening weekend matching Wish's entire domestic run. Ouch! Disney Animation doesn't even have an Oscar nomination this evening for Best Animated Feature. Neither does Universal, but they got a lot of cash to dry those tears. But I have to say, to Disney Animation's credit, since the pandemic, they have had Encanto, which did struggle at the box office like the rest of their films, but then blew up on Disney Plus, won the Oscar, and has, of course, become a mega brand for Disney. Overall, used at every corner of their empire. If only Lin-Manuel Miranda were consistent. He's not even involved in Moana 2. They're focusing so much on bringing back Ahi Cravajo and Dwayne Johnson, which they should, but you gotta get one song from Lin-Manuel Miranda. Come on. I'm sure he can be motivated to compose and write quickly. Now, talk about a road trip back to Kung Fu Panda 4. That movie seemingly has a long path ahead of it. There isn't another big animated movie hitting theaters until Garfield for Memorial Day weekend at the end of May. Oh my goodness, that is a very long... the studios keep giving Universal all this space. It's crazy. And Kung Fu Panda, by the way, has much better audience scores than its critic score, which I think bodes very well for repeat and, long-term business. Plus, fascinatingly, this is amazing. While Latino audiences have historically driven the horror genre, now they're making a huge showing when it comes to animation. Kung Fu Panda 4's audience was largely Latino, as was Super Mario Brothers. This is very, very interesting. In fact, Kung Fu Panda and Super Mario Brothers demographics look very similar, as you can see. And I wouldn't be surprised, here's where it gets really interesting, if this audience, this demographic, is also favoring Universal as a brand overall versus Disney, right? Not just in movies, but we're also talking theme parks. Very, very interesting. And sure enough, Universal is opening a theme park for families with younger children in Texas and a permanent all-year-round horror experience in Vegas. The Latino audience very much liking horror as well. How can Disney combat this assault on, almost every corner of their Magic Kingdom? I think Epic Games is a good way to go. The stake that Disney purchased in that, although that's still, for now, a virtual environment. But I think that might be a step in the right direction. But really, Bob Iger is solely focused on getting Disney just back on track and fending off the assault on his board of directors. That vote's coming up April 3rd. He can think about course correction later. I would also like to add that historically, Disney has been about idealism and inspiration. In fact, Disney defined Americana in the 1950s and even through the 1960s. Lost a little bit of its foothold in the 70s, not only because of Walt's death, but again, a change in the way people felt. So maybe, but they came back hard in the 80s. So it can happen. It is cyclical in nature. Never say never, never give up. But, you still also have to pay attention and keep your eye on the ball. That's why Bob Iger made all those acquisitions, like, Star Wars and Marvel, etc. And then Disney find them. All right, so anyway, but I do think that these days, idealism and inspiration are not the strongest pitch, with people very angry and disillusioned. It's very interesting, especially when you're a company like Disney, which is so locked in, for better or worse, into the pop culture and now political landscape. But I mean, when it works for them, it really works. So I can see why they're not, I don't know if they can give that up or if they would even want to. I'm very curious on your thoughts on this, about Disney versus the other studios and what they can do to stay competitive and evolve, but without losing what has made them such a juggernaut for forever. All right, we'll see if Moana 2 is the easy win that Bob Iger hopes it is. He's all in on sequels. Inside Out 2, also coming from Pixar. As for, we'll see how sequels work out. Some other studios, including Disney, have really faltered with some recent sequels. But DreamWorks, back to DreamWorks, they don't have any big swings coming up until 2025, where they take yet another page from Disney's playbook, and that's with their live-action How to Train Your Dragon. Although it does seem like they're doing a lot of the same formula as Disney's live-action adaptations, and so we'll see if Universal can, how they navigate that. I think, again, it's very interesting. For a long time, we thought that Marvel would never have the problems that DC does, but then suddenly they also find themselves in the same boat. So live action adaptations might just be tough. Okay, now let's talk Lisan Al Gaib. Just a 44% drop in its second weekend. Truly the stuff of legend. This is just incredible. This sort of hold is rare for a movie that opened not only as big as Dune Part Two, but a blockbuster no less. Blockbusters, if Dune Part 2 had dropped somewhere in the 50s, even the low 60s would have been just fine. But it would have been amazing if it held somewhere in the 50th percentile. But to have a 4 in front of it and to be in the low 4s, draw this stuff up on the wall of the Academy Museum or whatever, on the hill next to the Hollywood sign. This is incredible stuff. Again, the first Dune was released during the pandemic, day and date, on HBO Max. Although, let's be honest, the first Dune just wasn't as exciting a film as Dune Part 2. I know that's going to annoy some of you, but sometimes the truth hurts. Dune Part 1 walked so that Dune Part 2 could run. That's an old saying that people use, walk so someone else can run, but it's very much true in this case. The only really big concern is whether or not Dune Messiah would slow down again. This is, Frank Herbert wrote these books in the 70s. He pretty much invented the modern sci-fi genre, or at least got the ball rolling. Don't discount, George Lucas might have borrowed heavily from Dune, but he also evolved Dune very much to make it far more commercial, bringing in the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, that whole cycle, very, very effective. Dune has to, Dune's not totally out of the woods yet. I mean, this is certainly very special. But I don't know if you would call this like a set blockbuster franchise just yet. But it's certainly a very special movie. So Dune Part 1 also released very differently. And this sequel, no surprise, has already rocketed past the domestic haul of the first film and is closing in quickly on the first film's worldwide total. However, Dune Part 2 doesn't have the same wide open runway ahead of it as Kung Fu Panda 4 does. Because after this weekend, after that, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire hits theaters, which might also aim its proton beam at Kung Fu Panda 4, because I think it definitely is a family movie. And then Godzilla x Kong from Warner Brothers itself, what the heck, what's the friendly fire? That closes out the month the weekend after that. And Dune Part 2, particularly there, could lose at least some of its premium screen showtimes. I specify showtimes because remember, in the post-Oppenheimer world, premium screens have shown a willingness to divide up their showtimes for the day so that multiple films can be seen in the premium format, at the same time. Over the holidays, you might recall that there were 3 movies playing simultaneously on premium screens. One movie in the morning, one in the afternoon, and then a third in the evening. And we might see something like that if Dune 2 continues to be so strong. It's at its strongest with the premium screens. Kung Fu Panda doesn't have any premium screens, although not that it needed them. Also, by the way, side note, I should have mentioned this. Kung Fu Panda 4 was had mostly 3D screens. In fact, in a lot of places, you had to see it in 3D. And that, of course, also ups the price. Oh, I see what you did there, Universal. All right, so I mean, I for a time 3D was okay, although I'm not a big fan of it anymore. I don't think, except if it's like Avatar. I don't think it's, I don't think it really adds enough to make it worth losing the brightness of the picture. Although Aquaman 2 I had to watch it. They made us watch it in 3D at the press screening, and that movie was so bright that it was still fine. How do you feel about 3D these days? Did you go see Kung Fu Panda 4? Did they make you see it in 3D? All right, so at this rate, how high can Dune Part 2 go? If it can ride out these 2 big challengers in March, then it's smooth sailing from there, because it really doesn't have any competition until May, when the summer movie season kicks off, but with the Fall Guy, which I think is more riding Barbie's coattails. I said Dune Part 2. That's also interesting. Dune Part 2, I said, very much rode the coattails of Oppenheimer. And I feel the Fall Guy is trying to be, hopefully, at least to some degree, the new Barbie. But that would mean super fans of Dune wouldn't be into the Fall Guy. And they might still just keep going to see Dune. But how many more times can you see Dune Part 2? Some of you have already told me you've seen it 5 to 10 times. And the movie's only been out for 2 weekends. Not even 2 weeks. Just 2 weekends. And some of you are up to 10 showings. One of you actually told me you've seen it 10 times. I'm thrilled you love the movie so much. But how many more viewings in the theater do you have left in you? Dune Part 2 could still be burning fast and bright. It could be played out by the end of March. That is a possibility. And it could end around where Warner Brothers and Timothée Chalamet's other movie ended, Wonka, at around $600 million. That would be great for Dune. I think everybody would be very happy with that, because that's not only good it's certainly an improvement on the first film, a vast improvement, but it's in line with non-Batman Christopher Nolan films, which is why he gets the big bucks. $72 million, it was revealed, to go along with the Oscars. He's almost certainly, maybe even more than one Oscar, that he's almost certainly taking home tonight. A $72 million payday. Spielberg got paid even more than that back in the day, but nobody ever talked about it. So it's interesting. Nobody used to talk about studio executives and director paydays and stuff like that, but they're getting just as much attention as the people in front of the camera, which I think is good. The buck stops in a lot of different places. You got to take the responsibility. And also, I think it can be used for greatness. if you do it well and you do a good job and you're able to get people who think you're doing a good job. All right, so I think the third film, Dune Messiah, is a given at this point, for sure. The only question that remains is when it will fall into Denis Villeneuve's schedule. Will it be his next movie? Will he take a break and make something else first? I feel bad for whatever that movie is, because I don't know, we'll see what it is, but I think a lot of people will be like, why aren't you making Dune Messiah? And how much, by the way, will everyone get paid for that movie? I think the highest paycheck it was revealed for Dune Part Two was Timmy C, with $3 million. Isn't that interesting to see where the paydays fall? $3 million. That's a respectable payday. I wouldn't be surprised if that's somewhere around like what Pedro Pascal might be getting maybe for Fantastic Four. That's like a baby movie star just being born. Here's your $3 million pacifier. All right, so now that we've got this is something else to consider. Now that we've got 2 Nolans up and running and people are going crazy over their work, how will this affect the type of films and talent that the studios greenlight going forward? We haven't really seen, maybe the Fall Guy was greenlit earlier, but how will Barbenheimer affect the business? In multiple ways. Once Hollywood sees something works, they like to try and repeat it, but sometimes they aren't quite sure how to repeat it or what the formula truly is. Like for instance, after Barbie, everyone's like, it's toy movies, and I think to a degree. But I also think it's a different sensibility. I think it's very much Greta Gerwig. I think I'm still annoyed. Some of you are like, why do you take this stuff about Greta Gerwig so personally? Well, I just feel like Greta Gerwig is as much a visionary and a force in the industry as Christopher Nolan. But she's not getting any of the respect. Although Christopher Nolan didn't at first either. So I'm sure her Oppenheimer is somewhere down the line. That's nice because she made $1 billion. As to the rest of the top 10, Jason Blum's Horror Factory is still highly operational, with yet another low-budget horror flick able to perform in the marketplace, again, because the films are so cheaply made. And speaking of formulas, while Cabrini didn't open nearly as strong as Sound of Freedom, Angel Studios has still managed to turn their summer sensation into a foothold in the industry. Very strong audience scores here, which shows that Angel Studios knows their audience, which is why they are building a loyal following. They managed to outperform the similarly themed Ordinary Angels from a traditional Hollywood studio, proving that conservative/religious audiences aren't so easy to court. It takes some finesse, and Angel Studios has developed that. Bob Marley is indeed closing in on the century mark domestic and has doubled the domestic box office of Madam Web. Whew! Dakota Johnson tried to float out the excuse that she's simply not a fit with the superhero genre. But come on, let's call a spade, or in this case, a bad movie. I suspect Sony's pretty upset about how things went down with Madam Web. Because boy, everybody had a good laugh at that movie. I think it's affecting a little bit how they're handling Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Hopefully they're not 0 for 2. All right, so anyway, by the way, kudos to Migration and Wonka, who've both been in the top 10 for 3 months now. Look at that, 12 and 13 weeks respectively. They're even on digital already, and yet still people pay to see them in theaters. I mean, sometimes it might be subscription services and passes that might be doing it, but still, that's incredible. Are you somebody who's gone to see a movie in theaters even though you could watch it then technically on digital? What drove that decision? Was it the experience of going to the movies? Because it's certainly cheaper if you were to watch it at home. It's very interesting to see people's new movie-going habits post-pandemic. All right, so speaking of digital and streaming, let's head over there, starting with Nielsen as usual for the first full week of February. I know some of you were pleased to see the Marvels at the top of the movies chart, but the harsh reality is that this new movie, hitting Disney Plus for the first time, couldn't even break into the overall chart. Top of the movies chart, nowhere to be seen on the overall chart, which means its numbers are extremely low. So the Marvels actually never did find an audience on any platform. The film, I don't want to lay into it too heavily because it's already dead, but it really is an utter failure with no silver lining. We'll see if any of these ladies, work again, at least in Marvel. I think this has been, really serious. At least Brie Larson had lessons in chemistry, but it's just wow. Very rare to see something flop that poorly. I got Madam Web. Yeah, I told you these things. What's the same about all these? All right. However, it's not all doom and gloom for progressive content, as Mr. and Mrs. Smith continues to be a very strong performer in its first full week as a binge. However, Did its success as a binge influence Prime Video to make Fallout a binge as well? I think that was a huge mistake. It was just announced this past week because Fallout is a show that definitely would have benefited from a weekly discussion. They're going to have to transition it like The Boys back into, a weekly. I just can't believe they made that show a weekly. That's nuts to me. Although Mr. and Mrs. Smith was a beautiful binge. Also, True Detective Season 4, as it continues, it's going up on the overall chart with actually quite impressive numbers. So that's very exciting. More work for Jodie Foster and hopefully Callie Reese. Issa Lopez, who wrote and directed the show, just signed on for not only an overall HBO deal, but to do another season of True Detective. Over on the originals chart, there is a huge drop after the top 2 shows. So Halo might be number 3, but it's with a giant grain of salt, asterisk, whatever. Still, it's doing better than the other shows. It could be the other shows. And wow, look at how the bottom fell out under Percy Jackson now that the season is over. No lingering interest on that show. Like the Santa Clauses, don't be surprised if this show ends up only lasting 2 seasons. It might have just been a curiosity factor for season 1. With Netflix, if you watched Percy Jackson, are you excited about season 2? With Netflix's charts, the Amell brothers seem to have carved out their own little corner of Hollywood. No thanks to Steven's anti-strike comments, we shall never forget. Not only is their sequel a very solid number 1 on Netflix, though, but Robbie Amell's Upload just got renewed for a final 4th season. I stopped watching with season 3. I didn't like it, and I won't go back. But I'm glad they're going to get a chance to wrap it up. And Steven landed the new Suits spinoff set in Los Angeles. But Spaceman, poignant doesn't really rake him in, does it? That's a very soft debut. Maybe it'll be a slow burn because of the type of movie it is. This was its first weekend only. But clearly, this is not what audiences want to see from Adam Sandler, at least on Netflix. Then with shows, as we discussed again on the live stream earlier this week, there's Avatar's second week, its first full week. Not amazing, but at least it's still number 1 and strong enough to get a 2-season renewal. Likely, as we discussed, because Netflix wants to finish out the story before the actors totally age out of the roles. They're already kind of aged out, but it's going to get ridiculous very soon. By the way, with Cora delighting old and new fans alike on Fortnite with the new season, I saw her trending. I feel it in my bones. A live-action Cora, or at least more Cora somewhere, maybe with the OG creators and their animation, is coming. So Cora will be coming back as well. Exciting times for Avatar fans. How can you not be an Avatar fan? What an amazing IP. All right, then on iTunes, while audiences are getting ready for the Oscars tonight, catching those last few contenders still on their watch list, Light Comedy is what's winning the day, with Anyone But You still number 1, and Argylle, a respectable number 2 behind it. It just hit. Argylle just came out on digital. Was it worth the $600 million that Apple spent to make these movies? Probably with the prestige picks. They've kept their Oscar momentum going. Remember, they were the first streamer to win a major Oscar for Coda Best Picture, and they're still very, Killers of the Flower Moon is one of the most nominated movies of the year. But I do think that Argylle was a real misfire. However, while Apple will live to overspend again, how will Argylle's colossal failure affect the talent involved in front of and behind the camera? We're talking about what's going to happen to everybody involved with the Marvels. How about Argylle? Fair's fair. They're both horrible failures. Thankfully, Henry Cavill already had a lot of deals signed. This is why you always sign as many deals as you can while you can. But I bet the producers who have those deals are sweating. I sure would be. We'll see how his Guy Ritchie movie does. The one he's actually in and where he'll have no excuse to hide behind. As for this coming week, we've got a bit of a lull. Dune Part 2 and Kung Fu Panda 4 have some space to make some real cash before Ghostbusters Frozen Empire hits and then Godzilla x Kong. This is like the money machine. You've got another weekend to grab as much cash as you can. Mark Wahlberg, he had a very big hit with Apple himself recently. I watched that movie. It was okay. It was not bad. But I think he might surprise audiences again with this family flick, Arthur and the King. I watched the trailer. It looked really good. It's based on a true story, and people do love dogs. I don't know if it's good enough to see in theaters, maybe, but I think it's going to really do well on digital and streaming. Side note, you might have realized that, or might have noticed that Mark Wahlberg makes a very different type of movie these days, and that's because he wants to almost exclusively stay in the Las Vegas area. Why? Because he moved his entire family to Nevada for the tax breaks on income tax. Isn't that amazing? Celebrities and movie stars, they love to save money too. So that's why you'll see like almost every movie he does takes place in and around that area. Hilarious. Hey, he knows what he wants, and he's at a point in his career where he can coast like that. And still, thanks to streaming, wanting big names, still make tons of money that he doesn't have to pay taxes on. He still has to pay his team and everything, but not Uncle Sam. Love Lies Bleeding goes wide, while Anthony Hopkins and Michael Keaton both have smaller new films opening in limited. On streaming, Prime Video has a new take on Frida, while Netflix has Irish Wish. Oh, I think this is going to be huge. Even I'm tempted to watch it. If you told me before this trailer came out that I would watch a Lindsay Lohan romantic comedy on Netflix, I would have said you were crazy. But now, I'm kind of counting the days. Are you planning to watch Irish Wish? All right, then with because, don't forget, St. Patrick's Day coming up. I think it's on Sunday. I think it's next Sunday. All right, then with shows, Thursday is big. Invincible comes back to complete season 2 with a bang. I just watched my screeners. It's incredible. While Peacock drops the entire season of Apples Never Fall with Annette Bening, slightly embarrassing as she's nominated for an Oscar this evening. Maybe it's a great show. I don't know. And Supergirl, a.k.a. Melissa Benoist, is back, this time with a political drama for Max. And Netflix has season 3 of Girls 5 Eva, and a South Korean comedy where a girl turns into a chicken nugget. Oh my goodness, is that social media gold? While on Friday, Apple TV has more highbrow content with Manhunt, which, I'm a fan of history, so that actually looks really good to me. So a lot of good stuff coming up this week. And of course, the Oscars are tonight. Are you tuning into the show, or are you going to catch the highlight reel on social media? Either way, you can watch along with me as I'll be live tweeting the show. It starts early. I hope I got Movie Math up before then, at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, and that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? How much money do you think Dune Part 2 and Kung Fu Panda 4 can make in theaters? And what do you think Disney can do to fend off Universal and the like? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.